Welcome to Tales from Flat Space, a podcast of science fiction and fantasy by yours truly, Gina A. Pond. Just know that the stories in this podcast may contain content that could be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Survey, Part 3, Secundus, Chapter 21, Secundus. Uptime, 1,977 days. Syslog, begin human readable log. In the last 2 days, I have seen the crew's behavior become even more erratic. I have tried to interact with all of them, but with mixed results. I asked each one if they were all right. This, somehow, seemed the wrong question to ask. When I asked Derek, he was in the workshop. "Yes, Secundus, I'm fine. Why do you ask?" he said, as he repaired a connector assembly. "I am worried for all of you after finding out about the death of the others," I replied. He put down the soldering iron. "Thank you for your concern, but I'm fine," he said again, then continued working. Uncle replied similarly, although with anger. "Secundus, stop asking me if I'm fucking all right. I'm fine. Just leave me the fuck alone, would you?" "Yes, Uncle," I said, as he went back to work on his mathematics. I left him alone after that, but I noticed he still wasn't sleeping and was talking to himself in the hallways. The doctor didn't leave her quarters and was barely eating. I was able to make food for her, and after some prompting I could get her to eat or sometimes bathe, but she usually went right back to bed. Mick was the most confusing. At first he was like the doctor, but then at one point he curled up against the wall and started muttering to himself. Most of what I could make out was, "I should have told him before I left. I should have said something," over and over again. When he started pulling out his hair, I talked to the doctor. "Doctor, please wake up," I said. "What is it, Secundus?" she asked from under the blanket. "Doctor, you said to tell you if someone is hurting themselves. Mick is pulling out his hair." She sat up suddenly. "Tell me." I told her what I had seen. She took a few deep breaths, then said to herself, "Barbara, you're a bloody doctor, and you will get up and help this man." She got up out of bed, changed into more appropriate clothes, and went to Mick's quarters. She overrode his door lock and hastened to where he was still slumped against the wall. He didn't see her at all. He just kept pulling at his hair. "Come on, honey, come with me now," she said gently, as she took his hands and pulled him to his feet. "Why didn't I tell him I loved him, Barbara? Why did I chicken out? I could have told him right when we left. I almost did. I was so stupid. He tried to punch himself with his hands, but the doctor held him firm, then put her arms around him. The man just crumpled into her arms, sobbing. The doctor, too, had tears on her face as she slowly guided him out the door. After a long time, they finally made it to the med bay, where she was able to sedate him. "Secundus, we can't stay here for the whole month," she said. "We need to get Mick to a real psychologist, and we need our families and friends to help us too." "I concur. I am overriding Uncle's order and sending instructions to the drones. We will depart as soon as the instructions are sent." The doctor brushed back Mick's hair with her hand as he slept. "Thank you, Secundus," she said quietly, then sat to attend to her patient. I wondered if she was thanking me for more than just bringing the crew back home. "You what?" Uncle yelled, walking onto the empty bridge. "I am jumping us back to the first immediately. We cannot stay here and wait for the drones. You all need more help than I can give you. Mick is sedated in medbay and will stay that way until we get back." "But they asked us to bring them home, Secundus," he said. "They will be brought home, Uncle. I am commanding the drones to jump with the demon as soon as it reaches flat space." "I order you to go back. We can't just leave them out there." "No, Uncle, we have already left. I will not turn back." He again threw his tablet against the wall. I could see that the lack of sleep was making him irrational, as his arguments to me made no sense at all. "Take us back, Secundus. I'm your captain," he said, making it a command. "No, Uncle, you are my captain because I chose you to be, but you cannot, and will not, try to overrule me again on matters such as this. I am protecting my crew, and I will not have any more crew die because of your refusal to seek help. I don't need a captain to tell me what I know I should do." Uncle looked as if I had struck him. He stopped pacing and stared up towards my core. I waited for him to speak again, but instead he walked off the bridge and started walking around the rest of the ship. I dispatched a cleaning bot to pick up the pieces of the broken tablet. Nigel. Bloody AI, I thought again as I wandered the halls of the ship. I kept up a litany of curses in my head, and after a few minutes, Secundus closed his connection to me. Fine, you metal bastard. Fuck you. I walked aimlessly, not sure what to do, not sure where I was going, and not really wanting to think about why. But as the anger cooled and the consequences of the lack of sleep came with it, a piece of my rational brain started to kick in. Fuck, I said. I finally looked up to see where I was and saw that I was near the medbay. I walked in quietly and watched Barbara doing something to Mick, who was asleep on the bed. Hey, Doc, I said. The doctor jumped. Make some goddamn noise next time, Nigel. I thought maybe you heard the doors. She shook her head and pointed to the walls. Lots of sound deadening in here. Keeps the medbay quieter than other rooms in the ship. Right. I walked over to her and the bio bed where Mick was sleeping. How's he doing? I asked. When I looked in the bed, I was shocked at how small Mick looked for such a tall man. He was curled in a fetal position, and to my surprise, he was bald. Did you shave his head? She nodded. Yes, it was necessary. And I've had to keep him sedated. He was tearing out his hair. She turned his head, and I saw patches of angry red on his scalp. Shit, I said, feeling the last of my anger deflate into pure grief. Secundus was right. I asked him to take us home, Nigel. You did? Mick wouldn't have lasted the month, she said quietly. To be honest, I don't know if I would have either, if I didn't have Mick to take care of. The doctor was tidying around the bed, even though she didn't need to. I felt like such an asshole. I just yelled at Secundus. I've never yelled at him. Not in anger. Broke another tablet, too. You're grieving, Nigel. We all are. I think even Secundus in his own way. I know he says that he doesn't have human emotions, but I think he does have emotions of a kind. I thought about our discussion on the bridge and nodded. I was such a cunt to him earlier. I think he really did get angry at me. He reminded me that I was his captain because he chose me, not because I have a real rank. I found a chair, brought it over to the bed, and sat with my head in my hands. I'm sorry, Barbara. You were right before, and you're right now. I fucked this all up. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I didn't bother to wipe them away. She came over to me and laid a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry too, Nigel. We were all in shock, and we still pretty much are. You're not alone in this, mate. She reached down and gave me a hug, which seemed to break something in me. Tears started to run down my face, and before I could stop myself, I was sobbing. Barbara knelt down, and we held each other for who knows how long, and really I didn't care. After a while, the wave of grief between us subsided, and she stood up. Nigel, you need to sleep. I nodded, but I didn't feel tired, just sad. I'm not sure if I can. I'll give you a sedative, but I want you to stay here if I do, she said. Yeah, okay. I don't really want to be alone now. She gave a sad smile. None of us were really alone before. We just had to realize it, I think. Yeah, I said. I dragged myself to the nearest bio bed and laid down. I was so exhausted, but my sore eyes wouldn't close. Barbara came over with an injector and put it to my neck. Sleep now, Nigel, she said, as the drug started to take effect. Just as I slipped into unconsciousness, the connection with Secundus returned. Yes, Uncle. Sleep now. We'll be home soon. I had vague memories of waking up to go to the bathroom and having some sort of nutrition shake, but when I came fully awake, the lights in the medbay were dimmed. My mouth felt fuzzy and I was thirsty. I sat up slowly and looked around the room. I could see some fluid bags by my bed. How long was I asleep, I thought. It must have been a while if Barb had to give me fluids. Nearly 48 hours, Uncle, said Secundus in my head. Well, that explains why I feel rested, I said. Where are we? We're 2 days from first station. Father is expecting us and has the proper professionals on standby. I sighed. I'm coming up to the bridge after getting a bath and a change of clothes, okay? All right, Uncle, he said. My legs wobbled a little as I got off the bed. I held on to the edge until I felt like they could stay under me. As my body got used to being vertical again, I looked around and saw that everyone had made their way there. Derek was sleeping on another bio bed in the corner, with Flavius beside him on a chair reading his tablet. Barbara was sleeping in a chair next to Mick's bed, who was still sedated. I walked over towards where Flavius was sitting. Flavius looked up at the noise, then nodded to me. I went over to him. Is Derek all right? I asked in a whisper. Flavius nodded. I was walking by his workshop when he screamed. He was working on one of his retro gadgets and burned himself pretty badly with a soldering iron. I brought him up here. The doc fixed him up, and then he fell asleep. I didn't really want to be alone, so I just stayed here. I gave a small grin. I get that. How long's the doc been asleep? A couple of hours, I think. I nodded. Wake her up in a couple of hours and make sure she eats. You two okay? He nodded. I put a hand on his shoulder. I'll be on the bridge for a while, I said, and left the med bay. I felt better for a shower and a change of clothes. The shower gave me time to think. What I remembered of myself since we got the messages from the demon I didn't much like. To be frank, I behaved like an asshole. I went to the bridge feeling a lot of things and not really sure what to do about it all. Hey, Secundus, I said, and took the chair in front of the control panels. Hello, Uncle, he said. I'm sorry about what I said the other day. I was not myself. No, Uncle, you were not. I'm sorry I broke another tablet. The tablet can be replaced. I looked up at the controls on the wall, with all the readouts about where we were, how many jumps we were from first station, and other data. Yes, well, I'm sorry all the same. I accept your apology, Uncle, Secundus said. I nodded. You were right about bringing us home. Yes. I sat there for a while, mindlessly staring at the readouts. I wasn't sure how long we just sat together like that, but I didn't know what else to say to him. I still felt shitty, but at least now I felt like I could actually think. Uncle, you said when I first woke that I could do the ore surveying until I didn't want to anymore. Yes, it's always your choice on what you want to do, I said. I don't want to do this anymore. We don't need to travel with the ore drones, since what we have surveyed so far would last us a long time. Father wishes to make more children. I would like to help him do that. Are you going to make your own child? I asked. I think I would like to now, he replied. I understand, nephew. It's time to go home and build. Part 4. The Admiral. Chapter 22. Darren. Please, have a seat, I said to the man grabbing a snack in the mess at 0100, who was obviously trying to decide how to avoid bothering me. I put my tablet aside, picked up my mug, and took a sip of my cooling coffee. You're allowed to sit with admirals in the middle of the night, Lieutenant. I promise I won't bite. Oh, sure, if you wish, sir, he said, and came over to sit at my table. I never stood much on ceremony, especially in the middle of the night. I always thought it was the time when confessions were heard. Grandpa always said that it was after midnight when God came out. I suppose he would know, since he was a preacher. I had my tablet again. I wonder what he would have said about this trip, I thought. So, another person who can't sleep? I asked. He nodded. I got off shift a couple of hours ago and was still hungry, sir. I can never sleep when I'm hungry. I think walking on a slant all day seems to take more of it out of you, you know? I get that. What's your name, son? Billy Ward, sir. Well, Billy, we should be at the coordinates in a few days, and then we'll be able to walk upright again. To tell you the truth, I'll be happy when we get there, too. Do you think we'll really find anything left of Trinity Station? I mean, it's been over 80 years since they launched it, and the Indochina bloc sent all those missiles to destroy it. I'd think there wouldn't be much left. I looked into my mug. I'm not sure what we'll find. All we might find are little pieces of debris or maybe remnants of a gas cloud, if a direct hit vaporized them, but the science folks say there should be at least something left. We could try to bring home some of the remains and give them a proper memorial. Billy nodded. That would be right and proper, sir. Nobody should be left behind, no matter what. I nodded and took a sip of coffee. Gah! This is completely cold now. I stood up to refresh my cup. My grandmother was one of the survivors of the folks that came back. She used to tell us kids stories about that trip. It's a miracle my grandmother and the rest survived at all. The lieutenant was wide-eyed. Well, that makes sense why you're here, Admiral. But why investigate at all? Aside from a proper burial and curiosity, well, some of the last telemetry that came from the station's last known coordinates was a bit off. I picked up my tablet. For example, from what we can extrapolate, all of the missiles exploded just over 20 seconds after they reached the station's coordinates. Theoretically, the first few, at least, should have exploded as soon as the coordinates were reached. Even if they had moved the station, the missiles shouldn't have detonated simultaneously, but they did. The other thing is that the probes we've sent out here haven't shown any signs of debris. There should be pieces of hull floating around, maybe even bodies, but none of the probes have shown anything. The hope is that a ship with its bigger and better sensors and human crew can do a better job than the probes. It's a real mystery. So they could still be alive? That sounds like some sort of Bermuda Triangle stuff to me, Billy said, sounding justifiably skeptical. Well, I believe in them, but it's been 80 years, as you say. I doubt that they're still around. The station was only meant to last 10. Billy looked thoughtful as he ate his snack, and I drank the rest of my coffee. He finished, then stood up. I should go back to my bunk, sir. I nodded. He started to turn to leave, then said, I hope we find something, even if it's just some hunks of metal to bring home. Good night, sir. Good night, Lieutenant. Sleep well. Thank you, sir. I will. He walked back to the ladder to the crew quarters and headed down it. I looked at my tablet, which was still open to the Oceania political officer's notes. So, Trinity Station, where are you? Did you manage to survive? I asked the universe. With no answers forthcoming, I put away my mug and went to bed. Admiral to the bridge. I tapped my wristcom. On my way, I said. Thankfully, my office was close to the bridge. I walked in, and the captain waved me over. Admiral, we've just arrived at the coordinates of where Trinity Station used to be. Oh, good. Anything interesting yet, or are you just starting the scans? We just started the scans, sir, but the odd thing is that we're not finding anything at all. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Oh, Lieutenant. The captain motioned to the officer at the science station. I moved over to stand behind them. It's strange, sirs. There's nothing here. There should be some sort of bits of refined metals in the area, but there's nothing, not even vapor. I thought for a minute. Hang on. There was something from one of the political officer's notes I was reading last night. I brought up Akiri's notes on my tablet. From his deposition, he said that the AI specialist and the head of the physics group wanted to move the station. Something about Dr. Hassan's AI needing to be in an area of less gravitational force or something. I wonder if they actually managed to move it. The captain and the science officer mulled it over. The lieutenant answered, It's not impossible, sir. They did have maneuvering thrusters and engines. They wouldn't have had much reaction mass left, but it could have pushed them a decent distance from here. I could get with the navigator and plot some possible courses. Good idea. Account for the missiles, too. If they saw them coming, they may have maneuvered to try and save themselves, I said. Yes, sir. Carry on, then, I said, and the ensign got up and went over to talk to the navigator. Captain! Someone called from one of the other stations. We walked over to the astrophotography station. What is it, ensign? Asked the captain. I've found, a blip, sir, she said. A blip? I asked. Yes, sir. Here. The ensign put up a picture that was a negative image of the Oort cloud. There was the normal large debris of the Oort cloud, but a red circle around one of the dots. This dot hadn't moved as we approached this part of space. We take pictures all the time, so if it had moved like the other material, we wouldn't have noticed it. But just over an hour ago, it disappeared. What do you mean disappeared? I asked. Just that, sir. 1 second it was in our pictures, and then next it was gone. Almost the same time we reached Trinity's coordinates. So, Trinity Station, what happened to you and who's watching? I thought. I didn't think about it much, but there was a part of me that hoped they had survived somehow. Listening to Grandma's stories, I always thought that a station full of that many smart people would find a way. And what if Dr. Hassan's project was successful? I tried to put my speculations aside, but I had to admit part of me was excited. Good work, Ensign, I said. Keep an eye on that spot. I'd like to know if something shows up again. Yes, sir. I walked away from the station to let the ensign work without the big bad admiral looking on. The captain was watching me as I stared at the view screen, showing the area around us and the telemetry coming in. Granny always said she thought the AGI project was going to succeed. She had a lot of respect for that woman, especially since she knew that Dr. Hassan had lived through the Indian Civil War. What a bloody mess the world was back then. I was glad it was better these days, but old prejudices die hard. The captain came over to stand next to me. Do you really believe that they could have survived out here? He asked me quietly. I believe anything is possible, Doug. If God created a miracle, then I'll rejoice in reuniting with our lost siblings. If God just brought us out here to bury the dead, then at least we'll know this trip wasn't in vain. Be something out of a sci-fi novel if they did survive, Admiral. I nodded. I suppose so, but the science they were doing out here really was incredible. Have you ever read the project summaries? I asked. No, sir. I was never really that interested in Trinity Station. I was more interested in rockets and planes. I grinned. Well, I think you would have liked Trinity's captain. He was a flyboy, too. The captain chuckled. I continued. I've read all the information I could find on Trinity Station, including all of the video that survived the war. The UN archives and the Indochina archives had the most, despite the bombings. The work on physics and artificial intelligence alone would have brought humanity forward 100 years. We lost a lot of good minds with Trinity, Captain. It's still Indochina's great shame. That I know. They have a Memorial Day for it every year. I nodded. Like I said, I hope for a miracle, but I'd be satisfied just to bring anything we find of them home. It would be a good way to bring some closure to that dark time. The captain nodded. Being from the Indochina bloc, I knew he understood that more than the others. I put a hand on his shoulder. I'm going back to my office, so I'm out of your hair. Let me know if there's anything new. Aye, sir, he said. You're too much of a dreamer, Darren, I told myself. How I ever made it to the Admiralty, I never know. Admiral, came a voice over the comms. I turned toward my bedside shelf and sleepily pushed the button on my wrist comm. Yes? Sorry to wake you, sir, but the blip is back. I came fully awake and sat up. I'm on my way. I threw on some clothing and made my way to the bridge. The captain met me halfway there, looking relieved that I was just as rumpled as he was. I let him enter the bridge first. Report, he ordered. The blip came back to its original position, and it looks like it's moving towards us. Moving towards us? I asked. Yes, sir. I looked at the captain. A miracle, sir? He asked. I shrugged. Maybe. You're sure it's not debris? The ensign nodded. Yes, sir. Natural bodies don't move like that. Captain, something just appeared outside the ship. Captain turned. What? Show me. We both turned towards the view screen, which now showed a small metal box, about as big as an old-fashioned CubeSat. In the middle of the side that was pointed towards the ship was a round shape that looked, at least to my eyes, like a little lens. Then it disappeared. What the fuck? Said another ensign. How could something do that? Do what, ensign? The captain asked. Sorry, sir. It's now on the other side of the ship. No, the hell? I think it's jumping around the ship, sir. I looked at the captain, who turned towards me. Maybe you got your miracle. I shrugged. I don't know, I said with awe. It's gone again, sir. Okay. The captain took a deep breath. Right, helm, hold position here. Obviously, something's curious about us. Keep all sensors on maximum. I want to know the minute. Holy shit, someone said. What the fuck is that? The view screen was suddenly filled with the picture of a massive cylindrical ship that appeared out of nowhere. It was a slowly rotating cylinder, several kilometers long and at least a couple in diameter. How the hell did something that big move that fast, I wondered. The whole bridge crew just stared at the screen. I jumped as a trill sounded from the comm station. Captain, we're being hailed. Put it on, Lieutenant, he managed to say. Yes, sir, channel open. This is the United Earthship McAuliffe. This is Captain Doug Chang. Hello, Captain Chang. I am Lucifer of the Lightbringer. We, the descendants of Trinity Station, are here to welcome our Earth siblings back to space. My God, I whispered. I didn't realize I had tears running down my face until I couldn't see the view screen anymore. Chapter 23. Darren. The hangar bay opened to admit the shuttle from the Lightbringer. It looked like a large gray box with glowing strips on top. The docking tube snaked out to meet it. Looks like a black Winnebago without windows, someone behind me muttered. And a few people chuckled. They weren't wrong. I tried to keep a straight face as the tube sealed onto the shuttle. A tall woman and 2 other people came out of the open shuttle hatch. One of our visitors looked every inch of a pilot, and the other was a short person in some sort of modified samurai kimono, complete with an actual sword. From the way the samurai person moved, even in the low gravity, it seemed to me that they knew how to use it. The captain and I stepped forward. To my surprise, the woman was quite old, much older than I expected of a captain. She approached us, sticking out her hand. Hello, Captain Chang, Admiral Winters. It's a pleasure to meet you. I am Captain Mary Lopez of the Lightbringer. Welcome, Captain, I said. To say that your presence here is a surprise is a massive understatement. Yes, Admiral, I don't doubt it. While I appreciate the courtesy, gentlemen, I'm not a stickler for ceremony. We can let the rest of these folks go back to their duties and let Sarah here stay with the engineers who are probably desperate to crawl all over the shuttle. She gave a wide smile, and I could practically feel the relief of the junior officers. I smiled back and turned to Doug, who nodded. Dismissed, he ordered, and everyone behind us went back to their posts, except for a knot of engineers. Please follow me, Captain, Doug said. Would you or any of your crew like some refreshment? Thank you, Captain, but we're fine. We do have important things to discuss, however. Yes, this way. Doug led us out of the hangar bay into the main conference room. The orderlies made quick work of bringing drinks and a selection of snacks into the conference room before we reached it. One of the orderlies stood next to the door waiting to offer service. Captain Lopez turned to us and said, Again, I appreciate the refreshments. However, I do request that your aide please wait outside. She turned to the kimono wearer. Please wait with them, Cindy. The smaller woman nodded and stepped out with the orderly. When the door closed, she continued. I apologize for being abrupt, but while I wish this was a happy reunion, I must ask what your intentions are. Looking insulted, Doug started to reply, but I held up a hand. We came out here to find out what happened to Trinity Station, Captain. I take it you're one of the descendants? The woman chuckled. I'm one of the original crew members, Admiral. But you must be... She thought for a moment. 111 as of 2 months ago. Doug just stared in shock. That's impossible, he said faintly. We've made some major advancements in medicine, Captain. Our life expectancy is around 120 plus these days. I thought back to the crew manifest I'd reviewed so many times. Mary Lopez. You were the XO. She raised her eyebrows and nodded. Yes. I have so many questions for you, I said, not caring that I sounded like a kid on Christmas morning. I'm sure you do, sir, but again, I need to know your intentions here and ascertain the current status of Earth. To be frank, the last time we had a message from Earth, it was in the form of 16 nuclear warheads heading for Trinity Station. To say we have little trust in Earth is an understatement. She folded her hands in front of her and waited for our reply. To be equally frank, Captain, we didn't think we'd find survivors at all. The Admiral may believe in miracles, but most of us thought this would be a salvage mission. We were quite surprised to not find any debris at all, so at best you're miracle survivors, at worst you're political inconvenience, Doug said. I sighed inwardly, but he was right. I see, she said. She had a slight faraway look for a moment, then looked at me. Admiral, you are welcome to come aboard Lightbringer while we wait for further instructions from First Station. Captain Chang, I would ask that you send a message to your superiors and tell them of our arrival. She stood up. If you would like to come with us now, Admiral? I hesitated a moment, recalling duty despite my excitement. I should consult with Captain Chang before I join you. It would probably be best if I sent the message to Earth, as I'm in charge of this mission. She nodded. Understood, Admiral. You'll have to forgive me, as it's been a long time since I've had to deal with the strict chain of command. Tomorrow, then, we'll send a shuttle for you. We can send a shuttle with the Admiral, said Chang. Lopez frowned. Captain, with all due respect, what part of "we don't trust you" did you not understand? We will send a shuttle 12 hours from now. Gentlemen. And with that, she walked out. Doug tapped his wristcom. Captain to bridge, the Lightbringer shuttle will be leaving shortly. Please let the hangar bay know. Aye, sir. What a friendly bunch, the captain said sarcastically. Can you blame them? I asked. Did you know there were 16 missiles sent? Apparently that was information I didn't need to know, he replied. He sat down and rubbed his face and sat across from him. They are still strict with information in the Indochina bloc, Admiral. I learned more about Trinity from you than I ever learned in school. Thankfully, though, our superiors are UN, and you have that fun job of telling them what's happened. He paused. I wonder what makes you special enough to go aboard. I noticed she didn't invite me. Although I don't think you should go alone. If they are still suspicious of Earth, then they might have people who would take out their anger on an Earther. Now I was the one who frowned, because he was right, unfortunately. Don't become an admiral if you can help it, Doug. You end up doing way more political crap than you'd like. Let's send a message to Lightbringer and see if bringing an aid is all right. In fact, there was a lieutenant I met last night in the mess, named Ward. If he's available, I'd like to take him along. I'm sure we could figure it out with the XO, but why him? He was brave enough to listen to me babble at 1 a.m. Doug raised an eyebrow, but only nodded. I'll have the message for you to send in an hour, Captain, I said in dismissal. Sir, he said, and left the room. Before he left, he turned and said, I envy you, but what if they decide to not trust us at all and tell us to fuck off? That's what I'm hoping to prevent, Doug. I think Earth could use what they have. The captain nodded, then left. They're alive, I thought, feeling the elation and excitement in my chest. I wish Granny could have known. I got up and went to my office in the state of wonder and awe. God, you sure do make life interesting. I just pray that it's a good thing and not a curse. Lights, I said with a sigh. I'm getting too old for late nights. Putting my tablet down on the table in my quarters, I took off my uniform jacket, went to the head, and splashed some cold water in my face. After all this time, they're still alive, I thought for the 100th time since the Lightbringer arrived. What Granny would think of this? I wonder if there are any other of the original crew alive. Please, God, Jesus, and all the saints, please don't let the UN screw this up. I wiped my face with a towel. But as I was pulling on my night clothes, a chime went off on my tablet. Who could that be? Definitely wasn't from Earth, as it had only been a few hours since we sent the messages. Senior staff didn't talk to me once I retired for the night, and most of the juniors would be too scared to try. I put on my night clothes, grabbed my tablet, and brought it to my bed. If someone was going to interrupt my nighttime rituals, they could wait until after I was comfortable, especially if it was my ex. The tablet chimed again. I touched the screen, and a text window was open. Hello, Admiral. I am Lucifer. It is good to meet you. Lucifer? Aren't you the comms person who answered us from Lightbringer? Yes, you could say that. Why have you texted me? I would like to get to know you, Admiral. My captain tells me you were excited to see us and had questions. I do, although you're pretty brave for a comms officer to be texting an admiral. We are not as formal in our chain of command, Admiral. We abandoned it a long time ago as unnecessary, especially in light of survival. Interesting, I thought. Trinity Station didn't have a lot of military presence on board, if I was remembering my documentation correctly. Was that because the original crew were mostly scientists? That is correct. Where to start, then? How did Trinity Station survive? Unfortunately, Admiral, that is the one question I can't answer yet. At least not until we can confirm that we can trust you with that information. Who's we? Our leadership. It will take a few days to get an answer back from them. I understand. How did you get here so fast? It seemed as if you were suddenly right on top of us. We have developed a faster-than-light drive. It was necessary to escape and to allow us to find raw materials in order to expand our population. How many are you now? We are nearing several thousand, although I'm sure you will understand when I don't give you exact numbers. Several thousand? They've been busy. Made me wonder how they found time to work. This Lucifer seemed to know quite a bit for a mere comms officer. Why Lucifer? I chose the name, Admiral. It suits me and my work. I grinned. I suppose that it did that, if he was a comms officer. My granny would disapprove, but I suppose if you like it, it doesn't matter if anyone approves or not. No, Admiral. No one here would deny me the choice of my name. I see that it is late, according to your ship's time. I will leave you to your rest. Hopefully we will meet tomorrow. Thank you, Lucifer, and good night. Good night, Admiral. Connection closed. I put the tablet on the bedside table. It seemed that the scientists made some sort of utopia, or at least a society that seemed to have a lot of freedoms. And a faster-than-light drive? What that could do for colonization initiatives back on Earth. Then again, maybe that technology shouldn't get back to Earth, I thought. There are too many grand ideas about perfect societies. Lights off, I said, but it was a while before I slept. Chapter 24. Darren. Come on up here with me, Admiral, said the pilot. You'll get the coolest view from the jump seat. They patted the seat next to them at the far end of the shuttle. They turned to Billy and said, You can strap in over there. The view's not quite as good, but, well, the views of Lightbringer will be pretty awesome no matter what. Billy looked at me. I nodded, and he took the seat the pilot suggested. I strapped in, and the pilot tapped a spot on the control panel. I heard the docking tube disconnect. Hey, McAuliffe, the Admiral and his man are aboard. We're ready to jet. I tried really hard not to laugh. Pilots, I thought. McAuliffe, the Lightbringer shuttle. The hangar bay doors are open, and you're clear to depart. Good trip, Admiral. Thank you, McAuliffe, I said. Right, later, said the pilot, and the channel closed. They barely touched the controls as we left the hangar and turned towards Lightbringer. So you want a tour of the outside? They asked. Aren't we meeting with the captain? I asked. What is your name, by the way? My name's Didier, but everybody calls me Didi. My pronouns are she, her, in case you're wondering. And don't worry, the captain isn't in a rush and said to give you the tour if you wanted it. They tapped the panel, and suddenly the entire fore wall disappeared to show a view of the Lightbringer. There, if that doesn't convince you, nothing will. She smiled a mischievous grin. Holy shit, I heard Bailey muttered behind me. I normally didn't cuss, but I had to agree with the sentiment. This is incredible, I said. I know, right? Didi said. These babies can do a lot, but I'm not supposed to go into specs, unfortunately. But, okay, I'll tell you what. We can go to 10G in this thing. I've only done it a few times since I'm still a noob. We couldn't do that, though, since we'd need to bring out some specialist equipment. But we can go up to 3G in these seats. The pilot reminded me of a puppy whose owner was offering a steak. I could practically feel Billy turning green behind me. Not today, Dee Dee. Maybe some other time? Oh, well, of course not today, but you really want to give it a go sometime? You're cooler than I expected. You're not trying to say I'm old, are you? I said, faking sternness. Oh, well, no, I couldn't help laughing at her flustered response. It's okay, Dee Dee. You're not the first pilot to give me a ribbing. And I am old. At least my joints tell me so every morning, anyway. Dee Dee laughed in relief. I like you, Admiral. You're not so bad yourself, although we should probably get on with the tour before Billy here has a heart attack. Yes, Admiral, she replied. Dee Dee approached the station, which was indeed massive. The ship itself is based on the idea of an O'Neill cylinder, but with modifications over the years. There are 3 sections now, with a core tram that can take you to each section. The outer walls are where all the physical plant is, recycling, waste, all that stuff. It's mostly where the engineering guys hang out. Then the next inner levels are living quarters in the first section that we're passing right now. The next section is our university, mostly medical and biotechnology, but we have other schools and a small primary school too. The third section has some housing for pilots, the hangar bays, jump drives, and other science labs and workshops. Are all of you on this ship? I asked. Dee Dee laughed. Of course not. We only have about 1,500 here at the moment, especially since we're between terms. I am sure we'll fill it up eventually, though. We like to think long term. Oh, the intersections have gardens and shops and parks to walk in. You're going to love it. I'm sure I will. How big is this ship? Lightbringer is the biggest of our ships, and right now it's 6 kilometers long and about 2,000 meters in diameter. Although the ship can be expanded in both directions when we need to do so. This is incredible. How did you build all this? I said as we rounded the end of the cylinder. Dee Dee smiled and pressed a few buttons on the display. The shuttle pivoted, and we were nose to nose with the ship. I instinctively grabbed hold of my chair and heard Billy swear creatively under his breath. I looked at the screen and saw the windows on the edge of the section. Unreal, I said. I assure you, Admiral, it's very real. The end of the ship has most of the viewing windows. Wave hi, she laughed and waved to the ship. How can they see us? I asked. I thought this was a projection. The bridge can see us. Everyone else looking out knows you're in this shuttle with me. It may look huge, but it's really small when it comes to the people. Word travels fast. I get that, I said. Sounds like my hometown, added Billy. Right, well, let's go around the other side and get you in to see the captain and the inside of the ship. Sure you don't want to do a little 3G? I looked back at Billy, who looked terrified. Not today, Dee Dee. Some other time, perhaps. Ah, well, it was worth a shot. She tapped the panel again, and the shuttle moved around to the other side of Lightbringer. She explained more of the ship's functionality as we traveled the length of the ship. I could tell, though, that she was leaving out some things, and never answered my question about how the ship was made. You know an awful lot of details about the ship, I observed. Well, yes, of course I do. No one has just one job. I'm also one of the engineers that helped build out the most recent expansion. Being a demon rider is my second job. Demon rider? Oh, right. Our shuttles are called Demons, Deep Space Module Nonspecific, or DMN. They came up with that when they built the first Demon. One of the engineers coined it. The first pilot insisted that we be called Demon Riders. It stuck, although I think it's mostly as a tribute to him. Tribute? She frowned. He died in a bad accident when they were doing the first in-system test of the Demon. I don't know the whole story, though. If you ever visit Hub, you could ask Nigel. He was the captain on that mission. The name sounded familiar, and I thought about it as we rounded the back end of the ship. Then it hit me. Dr. Nigel Evans? I asked. Yeah, that's him. He's a crazy bastard, though. Was on his ship for a while, apprenticing. Man has more brains than God, but he's cranky as hell. I chuckled. Well, according to my study of the original crew, he had the same reputation on Earth. That doesn't surprise me. Makes a great beer, though. If you like beer, try the Flat Space Ale while you're on board. It's good stuff. You have your own beers? Said Billy, finally showing interest in something. Oh, yeah, Flat Space is the oldest brew, but People have been coming up with new stuff all the time, especially the biochemists. They keep having competitions on who can engineer the best hops. Hold on a sec. She turned the shuttle to face the back end of the station, where there was an opening. Tapping the panel, she said, "Lucifer, ready for docking." "Very good, Dee Dee. I have control." "Great. Tell Mary her guest in the Zeta has arrived." "I've already told her as much. Admiral, Lieutenant, welcome to Lightbringer." Dee Dee sat back and put her arms behind her head. "Sit back and relax. Lucifer's good at this." I watched the screen in wonder as the autopilot brought us in rotational sync with the station, then pulled us through the opening. The demon was deposited onto a platform, which moved the shuttle further into the ship. Eventually, it sank down through several layers to a hangar bay. I could feel the pull of gravity taking hold as we settled down into the docking cradle. "Awesome, right?" asked Dee Dee as the demon powered down. "Definitely. I don't think I've had a smoother docking. Your comms guy, Lucifer, seems to have many talents." "Comms guy?" she asked, with a confused look on her face. Then she seemed to remember and said, "Oh, right, our comms guy, Lucifer. Yeah, they're pretty talented." She almost looked like she was going to laugh, but cleared her throat and walked to the back of the demon where the airlock was. "Well, the captain's waiting for you, so let's get out of here." "Please watch your step. The gravity is lower here," said Captain Lopez as we stepped onto the tram platform. The captain had met us outside the demon bay, accompanied by the same bodyguard that had come to McAuliffe. The smaller woman nodded, then fell into step behind us. Somehow, Dee Dee had disappeared as soon as we left the hangar bay. "Thank you, Captain," I said. "This is incredible." She smiled. "Oh, you haven't seen anything yet, Admiral." A tram pulled up to the station, and the doors opened. Lopez led us into the car, which seemed empty except for ourselves. "Please, Admiral, come and sit up front with me. You'll want to see the view." I followed her to a rounded seating area with windows. The others followed, taking seats a little further back. I thought Billy's eyes were going to pop out of his head. "I must compliment your pilot and comms officer, Captain. The ride in was perfectly smooth, and the docking seemed effortless. I'm quite impressed." "Comms officer?" she asked. Did she not know her own people, I thought? Yes, someone called Lucifer. He's quite bold, too. He texted me last night saying he wanted to get to know me, and that apparently you let him answer some of my questions." The captain smiled, looking as if she was trying very hard not to laugh. Yes, Admiral. They like to meet the new people who come on board. We've become rather eccentric society and really don't stand much on hierarchy." "Interesting. I wouldn't mind meeting them, actually. Would that be possible?" "Yes, I'm sure we can arrange it," she said, with a mischievous twinkle in her eye. I raised an eyebrow. "Lucifer is a bit more eccentric than the others, but I think you'll like them. We'll probably run into them later." "I'd like that." "If you look out the windows, Admiral, we're now approaching the university section." I did so, and after a minute we emerged into bright daylight. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust, but when they did, all I could do was gasp in awe and wonder. On one side of us was a massive cylinder next to the tram tube, but on the other side I could look out over houses, gardens, plazas, and even woodlands and fields. The tram slowed as we reached the center of the section. I could see a busy market below, and colored stone in shapes that suggested sculptures. I pressed my nose to the windows like a little boy, without shame. It was a full 10 minutes before I could do more than just stare and wonder. Captain, this is a miracle." She chuckled. "Yes, I suppose you're right. Some of the elders and the second generation say that our youngsters take our scientific advancements for granted, but they never fail to fill me with awe every time I take the tram. I especially like it when one of the younger children's groups is on board. They look very much like you do now." Her smile widened, and I returned it. I looked back at Billy, and he also had his face up to the windows. Cindy smiled at him. I hope he knows how lucky he is right now, I thought. The tram picked up speed. We're going to pass through to the residential and administrative sections next. Not quite as impressive as the university section, but still quite lovely, Lopez said. The tunnel darkened for a minute, then opened up into what looked like a city with high-rises and houses. There were tubes coming off the tram tunnel down to the inner surface. We bypassed 2 of them before stopping at a third. Captain Lopez led us through the station and into the tube lift. We bypassed 2 of them before stopping at a third. Captain Lopez led us through the station and into the lift tube. Admiral, I need to talk to you in private, and it may take considerable time. If you allow it, Cindy can take your aide on a tour of the residential districts. If the lieutenant would like to, that would be fine. I turned towards Billy. No need to bore you to tears when there's lots of interesting things to see, Lieutenant. Yes, sir, but Captain Chang told you to stick to me like glue and not let me out of your sight. Yes, sir. I sighed. I don't think I'll come to any harm in a conference room, Lieutenant. Isn't that right, Captain? Yes, I'll even have another of Cindy's guards outside the door, if that'll make you feel better. Billy looked from me to Cindy and gulped. I'd like to see the conference room, sirs, before I leave for the tour. I nodded. I knew there's a reason I liked this kid. Lopez looked at the lieutenant with a bit more respect, as did Cindy, and nodded. The lieutenant let out a breath and gave a sheepish smile. We exited the lift onto a plaza with a building on one side that looked very much like an administrative building on Earth. The other end of the plaza opened onto a neighborhood with rows of apartment buildings. There were children playing in a strip of grass like a street between them. I wanted to stare at the buildings, but the captain was ushering us into the office building. She led us to a conference room at the end of a long hallway. Billy gave the conference room a once-over, pronounced it safe, and left with Cindy. Lopez gestured to one of the chairs and took another. The table was affixed to the wall, which seemed strange. The room is clear, Lucifer, said Captain Lopez, and a screen came to life where the wall met the table, with the face of a man in his late 30s or early 40s. The man smiled. Hello, Admiral. I heard you wanted to meet me. You're Lucifer, I stammered out. You're not a comms officer, are you? No, Admiral. That means... I was glad I was sitting. Dr. Hassan was successful? I said, with wonder in my voice. Very much so, replied Lucifer. I took a few deep breaths to steady myself, then asked, But why all the secrecy? Captain Lopez answered, As you know, the last time we heard from Earth, it was the beginning of a world war, and there were 16 armed missiles headed in our direction. The first of what you would call AGIs saved us, bringing us many light years away from here. We as a nation do not trust Earth, and considering the technology we have, we are wary of letting Earth know of the AI's existence. We left a satellite in our former position in order to know if a ship from Earth ever came out to the Oort cloud. But honestly, we didn't think we'd ever hear from Earth again. So the secrecy is to keep the AIs and ourselves safe. Lucifer, however, seems to like you, and against my recommendation, wanted to reveal themselves to you. We must now ask you to keep this secret for us, even from the captain and the McAuliffe. She leaned forward and looked me in the eyes. We will protect Lucifer and the other AIs at all costs, Admiral, including keeping you on this ship. I hope it won't come to that, Mary. I think the Admiral can be trusted. The Creator trusts my judgment, and so should you, said Lucifer. She looked at the avatar of the AI on the screen. There were a couple of minutes of silence, then Mary nodded. Lucifer spoke again. I apologize, Admiral. Like other captains of the AI ships, Mary has enhancements that allow for quick communications between us. We did not mean to be rude. That's fine. I'm just trying to take all of this in. I think I'm a bit in shock, to be honest. The captain looked at me and then went to a panel in the wall. It opened, revealing a food printer that had printed a glass filled with a pinkish liquid. She handed it to me. I took a sip. It tasted of some sort of citrus, which was refreshing. I took a longer drink, draining half the glass before I put it down. I felt a bit steadier for it. Thank you, I said. My God. Dr. Hassan's project was successful, and it saved Trinity Station, I said to myself as I shook my head in wonder. The avatar nodded. That is correct, although I am not the AI that was born that day. I am one of their children. One of? There's more than one of you? I was glad I hadn't taken another drink of the juice. Yes, but I'm sure you understand that I will not reveal details until after you've been vetted. Vetted by whom? I asked. Our leader is arriving with another of my siblings. It will take 4 days before they arrive. We would offer you and your aide the hospitality of one of our guest houses until then. Yes, I managed to stammer out. I would need to contact Captain Chang and let him know personally so he doesn't worry. I understand, Admiral, said Lucifer. Welcome to my ship. Please feel free to walk around and explore. You're also welcome to call on me at any time to answer questions. Thank you, I said. The screen winked out. Lopez grinned. Ain't that a kick in the head? You're not kidding, I replied, and downed the rest of the juice. You have been listening to Tales from Flat Space. If you want to support me in my writing, there are many ways to do it. Share this podcast, follow me on my Twitch channel, or buy my books. All you have to do is go to revginapon.net and click on the relevant links. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.